The only time I've ever heard of someone getting in trouble for doing more than required. This turned out to be much longer than I thought it would, especially for a first-timer. But I hope you find it worth it. Many years ago, I worked at a company that manufactured medical and scientific testing machines. Think shakers, small centrifuges, etc. I originally started there as a machinist, until I hurt my knee at work. 8 years and 5 surgeries later and it's still not fixed. After my injury, I switched over to the assembly side because that was more accommodating for my new limitations. Long story short, I was very good at my job, coming up with new ways to streamline several processes, new ways to assemble various things quicker than before, generally doing more work than my job description called for, and even having the temerity to prove the engineers wrong on multiple occasions. With everything I could do, I knew it would require the company to hire at least 3 people to replace me should I leave. It was announced one day that the assembly manager, AM, was leaving that job, whether for another position within the company or the company altogether, I don't recall, and anyone who was interested could apply for it, with a promise that inside personnel would have the inside track over outside applicants. I put together my resume and went for it. The son-in-law of the company's owner was doing the interviews, which I aced. He went so far as to tell me that my resume was by far the most professional and complete he'd ever seen. But I didn't get the job. No hard feelings. I just went back to doing what I had been doing. Well, as it turned out, they hired a friend of the owner's son-in-law as the new AM. So much for that inside track. It seemed to me, as well as my coworkers, that we weren't even at the same racecourse. But whatever, I could deal with it. I don't know what that guy's previous work experience was, but it became abundantly clear very early on that he was out of his depth. He had no clue why and how things were done the way they were. But he decided a couple of weeks after his hiring that he was going to change everything about the assembly area. One of the things he decided was that we were no longer allowed to exceed the number of machines assembled per day, nor were we permitted to skip over machines to get to others. Regardless of the issue, engineering issues, bad parts, wrong parts from the warehouse, etc. Some of those parts came from the machine shop side, but many from outside companies, too. But we also weren't allowed to stand around waiting for new parts from the warehouse. We couldn't even get with the warehouse personnel to help find the parts we needed or help them get the parts into our assembly area. No more doing more became our mantra. Productivity and quality plummeted. Needless to say, none of the assembly team was happy in the slightest. I tried. I really did. But I have issues with not doing things to the best of my ability. I also have issues with not being able to fill my workday with work. You know what I'm being paid for. I would be the absolute worst person to ask about quiet quitting. A few months into the new AM's tenure, my station was at a standstill due to an engineering problem with a new variant of a machine that I could practically build blindfolded. I had 4 or 5 college-educated engineers crowding my station attempting to figure out a problem that arose only after the machine was fully assembled, which I explained exactly how it could be fixed with minimal effort. BTW. And I was correct. But that's a different story. While waiting for the engineers to come to the same conclusion as me, they did. Eventually, I went to the warehouseman responsible for pulling the parts one needed to assemble and asked him to switch over to a different machine I was going to build. The AM happened to wander over just then and asked what I was doing. I explained the situation with the engineers and that I was currently unable to work on those machines, and rather than standing there looking lazy, I was trying to get a jump start on the other machines I needed to build that day. At no point did I get sarcastic. which is my normal mode of communication, or mean. Nor was I flippant in any way whatsoever. I was merely trying to get some work done that we both knew needed to get done. He starts loudly berating me in front of the entire shop, both the assembly area and the machine shop, specifically saying, "You're not allowed to do more than what I tell you to do. In the order I tell you to do it." Quote, I placated him as best I could and went back to my work area, which was still overrun with engineers, and settled down for a long wait. Cue the MC. Because I didn't work on another machine for the rest of the day. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was told I wasn't allowed. A couple of hours later, I was called into the AM's office for a meeting. I was expecting another stern talking to, which I could handle. Being ex-military, I'd long grown accustomed to being chewed out by people who didn't know how to do the job I was doing. What I was not accustomed to was getting a write-up for trying to do my job, especially since the official reason was insubordination. The AM didn't even have the courage to do it himself. He foisted it off on my immediate supervisor, who wasn't involved in the prior situation and had no idea what had happened earlier. I think he was busy putting out a different fire. When he asked what happened that justified my first and only write-up in the 2.5 years I'd worked for the company, when I explained it to my supervisor, all he could do was shake his head in disbelief. He was a good supervisor, at least when it came to getting the best out of most people. But he also wasn't really known for rocking the boat to stick up for his people. That said, when he tried to get me to sign it, I refused because I obviously disagreed. He said he understood, but he'd have to talk to AM about it. That did not go well. I could hear the yelling half a building away, despite the machinery running. Once again, I was called to AM's office, but this time I was facing the AM. He immediately started yelling at me again, but not just about the earlier incident. Now he wanted to know why I hadn't built the day's allotment of machines. I coolly reminded him that not only was there an engineering problem with the machines I was supposed to build, he told me not to work on any other machines, and to do so was insubordination, as he so callously put in the write-up. Then he asked me if I was going to sign the write-up. Once again, I refused. I don't think it's right or fair to be reprimanded for doing my job. If you don't like it, he said through clenched teeth, find another job. I can find 1,000 people who can do that job. I never said otherwise. Jackass. I was fed up now and refused to tamp down my anger any longer. But you'll need at least 3 people to do everything I can do as easily and as well as I can. Good luck with that. I left him standing there, completely flustered, went to my work area to gather my personal effects, walked over to my supervisor. I informed him that I was going home and would like to use my accrued PTO and vacation time for the next 2 weeks. He told me it was no problem, and as he was approving my request, I let him know that I was also giving my 2-week notice and wouldn't be back. He shook my hand and wished me well in my future endeavors. I did the same and left. I got to leave on my terms and through my son, who also worked there, as well as various friends I'd made while working there. I did learn that the company had to hire no less than 5 people to replace me and my expertise. I also got the last laugh, because I'm pretty sure AM got fired a couple of years later for various reasons, not least of which was the lagging productivity and his driving a mass exodus of the best personnel in the assembly area. Good for you. Hope you found a better job. Good for you. Not appreciated till gone, as is the case. Same thing happened to me. I streamlined patients' whereabouts on my ward, put it on an Excel spreadsheet, don't judge, and cast it to a 100-inch TV. Everybody love it. It's got conditional formatting for age, surgery and consultants. I had consultants telling me to change their colors as they preferred another color. No biggie. I scratch you back. You owe me a solid. It was so successful. Hospital look at expanding the concept to other wards. Yes. They are Amish when dealing with technology. Prior to me, it was whiteboard and marker pens every night to prep for the morning. But they did not want to reward me for my time or have me get my 5 seconds of fame. So they worked me out. When leaving, offered to show my manager how the Excel works. Her words, "It's Excel. How hard can it be?" Okies. Them fighting words. I had VLOOKUPs, conditional formatting, pivots and all those stuff built in but all hidden and password protected. Because people wreck things without knowing how they wreck things. Know my circus, not my monkeys. I was also told to remove the password protection. Again, it's Excel. How hard can it be? 2 years later, I get calls from my colleagues to fix up the spreadsheet still. Cells were deleted, renamed and or removed. Last update. TV came down. Whiteboard went up. Rationale given, it's more functional and lets us deal with a dynamic changing environment. It's so frustrating that organizations will let good staff go because they aren't willing to deal with poor leadership. Nepotism is great, ain't it? I'm sorry that you left a job that you were highly skilled at due to a totally incompetent and power-hungry manager. You played it extremely well though. At a previous job I started working on a project on the side during available time because it interested me. On my own I drove it home to the point that I presented the design and benefits to division leadership, up to our senior vice president who loved the project. Then I presented the project for a significant operating expense increase, which got immediately approved. Then my manager gave me a formal write-up for working on something he didn't order me to do. Since he still didn't order me to work on it, I stopped. Work wasn't approved, so I erased my virtual machines in the lab and returned the resources being used, leaving the only copies of the files on my laptop. A few months later I quit and they wiped the laptop for routine. Instead of having full automation for the network, they write individual scripts to do things. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. I once worked at a smaller credit union. I had been asking for additional help for about a year when I gave my notice, knowing I was moving eventually. I had written up detailed directions for everything I did, put it in a 3-ring binder. It was almost 2 inches thick. Had other people that had no clue how to do this stuff test every single thing. Just to verify I wrote it up correctly. I had given them a 4-week notice, so there was plenty of time to train someone. They didn't even bother advertising it until I was gone. The first person they hired couldn't even get through half of what I did on a regular basis. Ended up 3 full-time people replaced me, and some of the other jobs went to other people. So I would guess that makes 4 to replace me. Unfortunately, if AM managed to hang on for another couple or 3 years, that's probably a win in his book. Well, hell, I was going to tell you to find the exit, but you were already gone rolling on the floor laughing. TLDR.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.